Welcome back to the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. And before we jump into today's episode with Chris O'Brien, and it'll make sense if you're listening to this, you're wondering like, all right, it's Celtics Mavs, and you try to figure out a theme for every okay, maybe why, bringing back Noah Dalzo as a Celtics writer or whatever. There's a theme to this one too, and you'll get it. We'll get into it in a minute. The last time I talked to Chris was very themed to this finals as well, so it's really fun. He understands why he's here. It's a really interesting thought and conversation we'll jump into. Before we do, code 2 Pointers, $20 off your first purchase, SeatGeek.com. Always grateful to SeatGeek for sponsoring episodes. $20 off your first purchase, like I said, in the app of SeatGeek. You'll be able to check out a deal score. If for some reason you're in Boston or Dallas and you want to get to a finals game and want to save $20, that's the way to do it. $20 off your first purchase. Concerts, sporting events, baseball games, whatever you're doing this summer, $20 off is going to help you. And it also helps support this channel and be able to continue to bring out content like Trivia Showdown, which this is we talked about it offline, but this is a informal and formal now officially invitation. Trivia Showdown with Chris O'Brien will be done very soon. But before we do that, introduce yourself for somebody who's probably new watching this going, who is Chris O'Brien? What does he do? Why is he here talking about basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Chris. First of all, Trivia Showdown. What's the meme? I forgot who said it, but there's one of those meme graphics. I will be there no matter what. I forgot who said that one, but that's how I feel about the Trivia Showdown. I'm going to be there no matter what. But I'm Chris. I'm a host of the Ball Game podcast. We talk NBA, we talk NFL, and the reason why I'm here is because Luka Doncic is my father.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just jump right into it to make sense of that. So, because that's just, I mean, look, that's how I was going to start. And for the listeners, for the context, we did a trade deadline. I think it was a recap technically because it was kind of boring. We were like, well, you got to talk about something here around this time. And so how do we do it? And we frame this, we frame that. And you're like, look, this is how I feel about this and this. And that included some of the acquisitions. I was probably a little stronger on the Daniel Gafford side of things. You're probably a little stronger on the PJ Washington side of things. I think I'm telling that story right. But just for the context for the listeners, you're really the only person that I know that talks basketball that had any real, I'd say real semblance of belief that Dallas is a legit contender. I remember being in the chat of one of the Ball Game pods, long story short, and it was like a tier list. I wasn't going to include that nugget, but it came back to
me versus the world.
It was literally it was me in the chat and then a couple of guys that were on the show and then your normal hosts. And it was like, all right, we're going to put the West guys in tiers. This is the week or before the playoffs start or something like that. It was like, all right. And you were like, no, Dallas needs to be in this. We need to take them seriously. And I'm like, I believe him, but I don't. So here's my first question to you is really less of a question, more of take your well-deserved victory lap. And then when you're done, tell me what surprised you about this team, even though you believed in them. What surprised you that even though you have a victory lap to have, what still surprised you on the way to the finals?
I mean, my biggest victory lap is the one point I've been trying to make since the Dallas Mavericks acquired Kyrie Irving. It was very simple. If I'm any team in the Western Conference, I do not feel confident going up against those guys in a best-of-7 series. And it was really that simple. This was before the trade deadline this year. This was before they drafted Derek Lively, before they brought in Derek Jones Jr. I just believed in the talent of those two guys, and if clearly we're seeing it, if they could keep a game close, you don't want to be in a tight game with those guys. But then they go and have this phenomenal offseason, this under-the-radar offseason where they trade up and draft Derek Lively, who's probably the third best player on the team right now, honestly. They bring in Derek Jones Jr. on the minimum. He actually said recently that he had an offer from the Bulls. He took less money to come to the Mavs so he could show off the player that he truly is. And then at the trade deadline, you go and trade for two guys who've been key for them in this postseason run. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's Luka Doncic, who I've thought is the best player in the world for about 2 years now. I know technically by default, you have to say it's Nikola Jokic because of the hardware he has. He won a championship. He's a 3-time MVP. I definitely agree with that. But I think just pound for pound, who is better at the game of basketball, accolades aside, I think that is the best basketball player in the world right now, and he's showing it. What I'm most surprised by, though, is the fact that the other dudes were able to carry the slack while he was playing on basically one leg. That's something I didn't see coming. Obviously, I had all the confidence in the world in this team due to Luka Doncic, but when I saw that he was injured in the first round and going into the OKC series, I was nervous. I was definitely nervous. And PJ Washington, I mean, what I want to bring it up. I don't know what he averaged in that OKC series, but I'm pretty sure he shot over 45% from
He
three.
turned into our generation's Robert Ory. I mean, that's
Yeah.
exactly what he did.
Yeah, it was an out of body experience. That's something. As much as I thought the PJ Washington trade was a win for them, I'm not going to get up here and say this is exactly what I saw coming because
No,
I
and
didn't.
you're right though. And like Hornets fans, obviously, I used to have a co-host that was a Hornets fan, and I think you remember Josh,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then also like just the audience I have here, like Hornets fans are at home kicking and screaming, like they are, like not that they were ever going to be in this position with PJ Washington, but like they were like this, we knew this was in here all along, and I'm like, no one in their right mind thought that he was going to do what he was going to do, regardless of the game six play with Shea. Like that was just, I'm still deciding
yeah.
whether I believe the rule call. I know what the rule is, but it's just interesting how it turned out. But I mean, Hornets fans are kicking and screaming, going like, even we didn't think that PJ had this inside of him.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it was there all along, and I knew he would have some games for them in the playoffs, and I definitely knew he was due for some positive shooting regression come into the postseason because he shot pretty terribly from three once he got to Dallas. I don't know the exact percents, but it wasn't that good. So I knew he had some games in him where he was gonna shoot the ball well from three, but I mean, 45% from three for an entire series where he was shooting like probably 8 attempts per game is just it's an out of body experience for him. So I didn't see that coming for sure. That's one thing I'm surprised by.
Career 35% from three, 32% on the total season, according to Basketball Reference. And then just in general, the way the Basketball Reference page displays it for this season should just include regular season only, 31.4%. And
Which
then
isn't that
just,
great.
but I mean, it turned into a 38 to 42% shooter, depending on the night. I think the most important thing you honestly said in that entire blurb was kind of like you started with this, and I'm glad you started with this, and then you were like, but then you gave the role players their fair due, which is what they deserve. But if we're being real with each other, like I mean, the point is that going back to last year, I don't think anybody can refute this. This is how you led with it, right? It was obviously bringing in Kyrie Irving and how important he is. However, people like myself and you and anybody else who was like, yes, Kyrie is incredible, and I'm glad they got him locked up. It was really a question of how many years Dallas was willing to pay him. There was still reasonable questions. It was still Kyrie Irving. It was still 6 years versus the years before in Cleveland, right? We still didn't really know, was he going to lock in for a full year and be a valuable player? Honestly, it really hinges on the fact that like those two guys had to work out together, and their chemistry this quickly is just a bonus at this point. It's not a question. It's just everything you said is right, and I'm adding to it because it's true.
Yeah, and I mean, it just felt to me like at the time I just thought it was gonna be so seamless, and that's why I was shocked that they were so terrible down the stretch of last year. I was genuinely in disbelief, but gave them a whole off season together. And again, they added the right pieces around them, that can't get understated how important all the role players have been. But their games just gel seamlessly. Kyrie was never a guy who was going to demand touches, who was going to be the super high usage player and take away from Luka. But when the going gets tough and Luka needs a little extra help, that's where Kyrie comes in, and we saw it for all those years with LeBron, man. And like you said, I was just banking on him getting back to that Cleveland form, which not even anything about the stats. It's just doing exactly what the team needs to win as the number two guy, and that's the biggest thing for Kyrie this postseason. The shooting splits are great. The averages, like scoring averages, don't really blow you away, but time and time again, whatever they've needed from him, they needed him to take over in the fourth quarter. He's done that. They've needed him to be a playmaker. He's done that. They've needed him to sit in a chair and guard Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the second place MVP voter this year. He sat in a chair and guarded Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for stretches. It wasn't the best defense of all time, but he made some plays and a lot of deflections, and the both of them, Kyrie and Luka, that's something that I've been so impressed with them. Obviously, those guys are never going to be plus defenders just because of their size and their athleticism, but the way they're using their hands and just being in the passing lanes and just being in the right spot and locking in and doing what Coach Jason Kidd is asking of them has been phenomenal.
So I'm glad you tied Luka back into that there at the. I mean, it's veteran ridden place. I mean, that's what it is, right? Just some guys at the end of the day, playoff performers. I mean, and whether people like this or not, these two guys are all timers. I mean, like these guys have a chance to continue to be in places that I don't think people were putting them. I scrapped a pod a few weeks ago I believe it was after the Thunder series, so I still had a whole round to absorb of them making the finals, for crying out loud. I scrapped the premise because I saw this coming. I'm like, well, okay, if Luka wins this series, which they very well can do against Minnesota, I didn't see it happening the way it did. Let's be real for a second, right? I don't think anybody really thought like, okay, sweep, like potentially, you know. I thought it was going to be competitive. But my point is I mean, I had a whole pod prepped, a whole open about Luka's reaching places in fearedness, and this was just on a Western Conference Finals appearance 2 and 3 years, right? The 1 year they intentionally get out of it. Where we're going to have to start putting him in places that all time that are just like uncomfortable to think about at his age. I say all that to kind of transition back to the finals for a second here. Regardless of getting into the best player in the series for a second, that plays against him in this case. Statistically and historically, the series with the best player on the best team versus a team like the Celtics, like if you go up against and you say like Cleveland in 2007, right, like they just weren't going to win because they were playing an all-time Spurs team or whoever that was. I think it was the Spurs that year, 07. But just an example off the top of my head of like LeBron was the best player in the world at that time or becoming that guy, best player in the series without a doubt. Team on the other side that was incredible. You just don't; those guys don't win those series, right? Obviously, we're not crediting the guys around Luka. I'm just saying comparison A to B historically. The other things that are against them, Mavs would be the third biggest finals upset if they were to beat the Celtics since the 76 merger. So in 40 some odd years, they would be the third biggest upset in finals history, according to odds. So just for fun, really quick, who do you think are the two teams ahead of them? Both of them both of them since the 2000. So the merger is kind of a weird thing to throw off that, but
okay, the 2019 Raptors probably
they are second. That's a heck of a pull, yeah, because KD was uncertain injury wise, yeah.
Right,
so that's good.
Right.
I will tell you this: this might not help you, but Mavs are plus 185 to win the series. The Raptors were plus 230. The next closest team is plus 500, 5-1. The number one team ever to be this big of a deficit and win the finals.
You said it's since 2000?
Yeah, it's the merger is the stat, but
okay.
It's since 2000 because there's a few other teams.
Pistons?
It is the 04 Pistons, yeah. The more I thought about this list, I'm like, I don't know if I could have pulled that. And then I'm like, if you really just break down how little this happens, especially since 2000, those are the three answers.
Yeah.
The 2016 Cavs, I believe, or Warriors, one or the other. Oh no, the 2012 Thunder was pretty high up there too. They actually were favored over the Heat in that series where they lost
insane.
in 5. Yeah, there's a couple in there. I didn't write a lot of these down. This is all off memory, but and then to continue my point, I know I'm long-winded here. Boston is a team with less than 20 wins in a season entering a finals, 14-1 all time. So if you are that caliber of team that we talked about, right, where Boston, whether we like this or not, there are only a few teams to lose that many games in NBA history. It's less than 60. And basically 80% of the time, I'm rounding up or down here since I looked at the stat about a month ago, basically 80% of the time or more, the team wins the title. All that being said, I know that was long-winded, so hopefully you got most of that. The stats are against Luka. How much stock are you putting into him being the best player in the series and how much that can be the difference that they win the title?
I think he's far and away the best player in the series. Let's get that clear. I'm pretty sure you agree with me. I hope you agree with me on that one.
Yes, I'm not. Okay. And like, the far and the way thing, like, it's going to piss off a lot of people, Celtics fans or not, because Tatum needs this to be in this conversation. Like, think about it, right? Like, say this goes to 7, say this goes to 4. Doesn't matter, right? We're going to wake up 4. Yeah, whatever. You get my point. Sweet. We're going to wake up on that Monday morning, and First Take is going to say, wow, Tatum's actually closer to 1 in the world than he is to 5. No way. And it's like, that's the conversation that's going to start. He loses this finals. We're all going to do the same exact thing, the opposite direction, where like Luka's going to, like, you did it in the first 5 minutes, right? Like Luka's basically up there with Jokic, which
I was actually just making this point to someone, Sleazy, who comes in our chat. He got upset that I said if Luka wins this finals, I think he should be the unquestioned best player in the world right now. And he said, well, why not Tatum? If Tatum wins the championship, it's the same thing. If you're saying if Luka wins the championship, he's the best player in the world. And I was trying to just explain to him that there's just levels to this, man. There's just Luka has the eye test that says best player in the world. Tatum doesn't have that. Luka, the only thing missing with him is the hardware, the championship, the MVP, if you want to say the MVP. Tatum, the eye test doesn't say best player in the world. That's the thing. That's the difference. There's just levels to it.
As dumb as it sounds, the hardware is that important, though. Like, it really, like, think about this for a second. 2021, Celtics win the finals, or whatever year, 2022, whatever year it was. God, I can't believe we're not 2 years removed from 21 anymore. Like, I just said that out loud wrong. Just whatever. 22, they make the finals, they win it. I'm giving you hypothetical here, right? Say one of these years he was close in the MVP, but he was never that close. But say like we all thought, I think it was pre-2023 that we all thought he was probably going to be at least the favorite to win the MVP. Say he wins it that year, right? And then he wins a title. So that's 2 MVP this year, just hypothetically. That's 2 titles and an MVP in 3 years. He's 1,000% in this conversation. Like
100%.
we're sitting there and going, okay, it's 2 titles and a handful and 7 out of 9 appearances
It's
in the Eastern
him.
Conference Finals.
It's not even just a conversation. If he did what he had to do, it's him. No question. No
3
question.
MVPs in 4 years is stupid, and it should have probably been 4 MVPs. The more we look back at that year, I mean, it's crazy to think that like there's a guy that could have had a 4-peat for crying out loud. Like, let's be real. Like you and I are gonna have this conversation in 20 years and be like, Jokic didn't win 4? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's gonna look crazy. But anyway, but my point is you obviously understand how good Luka is, and that's the point you led with. But my argument, regardless of the history, is how much can we really say the best player in the series matters? Because it does. I do a tier list every year. Best player in the series is if you are. That's part of the reason I kind of went against my own rules when you made the argument earlier this year about the Mavs being a real contender. And I don't know what I was thinking, because they really are.
So I think it's not just the fact that Luka is the best player in the series. I think Luka's skills can potentially expose the Celtics. And this might be the only flaw, and this might not even be a real flaw. This might just be me making this up just so I could pick the Mavericks to win the series. But the Celtics have switched everything all year. That's been their defensive philosophy. They've pretty much been switching everything all year and trusting their guys. I don't think you could do that against Luka Doncic. I think at some point, Luka Doncic is too good to not figure you out throughout a 7-game series. So if you're just, and that's what Joe Mazzulla does. And listen, his system as is, it got you to 60 whatever wins and to the NBA Finals. Like, when it's working for 100%. But when it doesn't work, they kind of look lost. That's the only flaw I could come up with this team, because other than that, they really don't have any flaws. Maybe the bench, if you want to say the bench. But my point being, if Luka Doncic is getting switches on a 70% Kristaps Porzingis, he's going to eat on those every single time. If Luka Doncic is getting Al Horford on him, I know Al Horford, for his size, is really good in space, but this is Luka Doncic we're talking about. That's barbecue chicken. It's as simple as that. And if the defensive philosophy is going to be to switch, then Luka will get whatever he wants. And that's why I think him being the best player in this scenario can actually just completely swing the series. Bless you.
Thank you. I was muted, I thought, and then I'm like, well, I am. Oh my god.
No, you were muted. I just saw it, and it was really good timing because it was at the end of my sentence. So
yeah,
end on that.
Thank you for carrying that out. So, all right. So the defensive thing, I don't really have anything to add to that, because honestly, I'm starting to learn the longer I do this whole talking in front of a microphone about basketball thing, that I can give my opinion all I want, but like I'm not the answer to what is their like. I have a question right down. However, do they have the ability to stop/control Luka and Kyrie? And if so, how? And then you just kind of laid out that whole thing, so it's not even a question anymore. Totally fine. What I'm trying to figure out is, you mentioned the bench. Like, the Celtics bench is absolutely a problem. Believe it or not, as crazy as it sounds, the Mavs have a more consistent bench. It just is what it is for how good Boston's been with the depth. My problem is, you mentioned Porzingis, 70%. You just kind of threw the number out there. How many days do you think it's been since he played his last game?
I'm going to go with
calendar days.
30. I'll go 35.
37. Right on the nose.
Close. Yeah.
Round 1, game 4 versus Miami. If he's not healthy by now, I understand it's hamstring or something, lower leg, whatever. He's dealt with that his whole career, whatever. But 37 games to just like ramp up and just chill and get used to the game speed again. That obviously game 1's going to be an adjustment. He has to be healthy now, right? I mean, like literally
I think
like 5 minutes. Good.
I think he's healthy. I think you can't replicate game speed in practice. So
Oh, I
you know what I
know.
mean.
Yeah.
Right, like he's doing work, he's doing all his stuff. I don't doubt that he's healthy, but like you said, it's going to be an adjustment period, and maybe that is just game 1 for him. Maybe he doesn't get 100% right the whole entire series. Like it's just he's so much of a wild card, and especially given his injury history, it's so hard to predict with him.
Yeah, look, I don't have, again, sometimes like there isn't the perfect answer for this. Like literally 5 minutes before we started this, I was coming back from the other room. I was looking at the video. Again, I mentioned her earlier. Noah Dalzell does some incredible work. I had her on the pod this year and doing like live streams from practice and stuff, like, this incredible work. And she posted a video from the press conference today. It wasn't her that asked it, but somebody asked him, was like, hey, I mean, just, are you healthy? Or like something just straight up bluntly asked Porzingis. And he paused for like what felt like 15 seconds. It was like 10 to 15 seconds. And he said yes, and he laughed. So something tells me, like, yeah, of course, Celtics fans are all over the place. They're like, I don't know what to think. I don't like this. Da, da, da. He's healthy. Like, I can't. I've never been through a hamstring injury of that size, of that caliber for a guy of that size. But like, once he gets back his sea legs there, they might lose game 1. This is the lowest floor 60-win team I've ever seen. It just is. They lose game 1. They could lose game 1 to an 8 seed in the finals. I wouldn't be shocked, right? Like it just would, right? We've seen this. My point is if he's healthy, if he's healthy and he's effective, they can win the finals. Not comfortably, but they can win the finals and exploit a lot of really comfortable things in that matchup. And that's the issue, is we really just don't know. And that's what I hate, the fact that we've done for this 22 minutes and we're just now bringing up how big of an X factor he is.
He's the biggest X factor in the series by far. I mean, it goes without saying. He just, especially against Dallas's bigs, who their biggest weakness is guarding in space. A guy who not only could stretch you out to the 3-point line, he could stretch you out to 3 to 4 feet behind the 3-point line. Like he could stretch you out 28 feet from the basket, which those guys are best when they're protecting the rim. So if he's healthy and he's hitting shots, I really don't know how the Mavericks are going to guard them, to be honest. For as great as the Mavericks defense has been throughout this postseason, the way the Celtics are able to get off 3-point shots 1 through 5, I really don't know how they're going to guard them. It's really just going to be pray that they don't shoot good from 3 and let Luka and Kyrie do their thing. That really, yeah.
No, it's a real thought that. So really quickly, to make sure we cover all bases here, Porzingis is the obvious answer for the Celtics. But is there somebody that, say he isn't healthy and they have to just go with that? Say he is, but Dallas has a match. Like, I'm just giving you scenarios where maybe Porzingis gets negated in some way, whether that's his own injuries or Dallas does something. Who is somebody on the Celtics that has to, like, who is the X factor that just gets something done? That doesn't have to be a player. It could be Sam Cassell for all I know.
Has to be Al Horford. Has to be Al
Really?
Horford.
Okay.
Has to be. Because the same way I'm saying, Luka will put Kristaps into all the actions. If Kristaps isn't ready to go and you need Al Horford to play 42 minutes, because you don't want Luke Cornett out there. I promise you don't want Luke Cornett out there as much as possible. So Al Horford, even if Porzingis, isn't 100%, whatever the case may be, if he's not ready to go, they're going to need heavy minutes from Al Horford this series. So, and I said this on our show too. This isn't like a knock on Al Horford. I think he is fully capable of not guarding Luka Doncic, but can Al Horford get a stop here and there if he has to guard out on the perimeter? Absolutely. It's Al Horford. He's made a name for himself doing that for 15 years now. So but he's going to be in every action. He's going to have to hit his threes, because the same way I'm saying Porzingis could stretch the defense out, that's what you need Al Horford to do if Porzingis isn't there. You need to get Derek Lively and Gafford away from the basket on the offensive end. So I think Al Horford, if it's not Porzingis, I think Al Horford's the biggest X factor for me.
Flip side of it, if it's not Luka, it's not Kyrie. I know you mentioned Derek Lively, but like, who is somebody Dallas has to rely on for 5 to 7 games if they want to win the title? Because they're obviously the ones digging the deeper hole here.
I think it is Derek Lively. I really think the big men on both sides is going to really determine the series. I really do expect Luka and Kyrie to do their thing. As much as I want to clown them and make jokes about them, I expect the Jays to have a phenomenal series, especially given what they did in 2022 because it was awful. I expect them to really bounce back here. Drew Holiday and Derek White, you know what you're going to get out of those guys. PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr., I'd like to think I know what I'm going to get out of those guys. I'm not saying I'm getting the OKC series PJ Washington. I'm getting normal PJ Washington, but I'd like to think I know what I'm getting out of those guys. But it really comes down to, can Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis keep Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford away from the basket to clear the driving lanes for JT, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, all those guys to get one-on-one matchups with Luka and Kyrie with no weak side rim protection? Or will Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively be able to guard out in space, close out to a Porzingis three, and then rotate back down and be able to get in position to play help defense and stop these driving lanes and put the Mavs in rotation? So the it's kind of all those run bys and quick closeouts to try and run them off the 3-point line and bring them in there. So I think the big men on both sides are the X factor in the series.
I love that. So it laid out the case for all of these different scenarios for these teams. I just wanted to kind of hammer my point a little bit about the historical data for the Celtics that really needs to be understated, because whether we think as good as Dallas is and can be, they win this finals, it's statistically impressive. Here's some notable teams that lost. Sorry, I got the filter wrong here. Let me make sure I get the filter right. Lost less than 20 games. And I'll filter it back out again. The list is really small. Here's teams that basically, I'll lay out the criteria on StatHead. Teams that since the merger, because that's kind of like the nice drawing point, with less than 20 losses, which is the Celtics criteria here, that lost the finals, the list is 7. 7 teams since 1976. That's Golden State in 2015-16, 73-9 team. That's Utah in 96-97, so lost to Michael Jordan, right? Lost to LeBron for the Golden State Warriors, right? Seattle in 95-96, also lost to Michael Jordan. Boston in 84, lost to Magic Johnson. Utah in 97-98, lost to Michael Jordan. Phoenix, Charles Barkley, lost to Michael Jordan. And Oklahoma City Thunder, 2011-2012, lost to LeBron James. What I'm telling you, and I want to make sure I got the filter right, even if it was fumbling there a little bit. What I want to make abundantly clear that I should have been more clear with earlier, just because of how, whether we make predictions or not in a second, which we are. Didn't prep you for that. Sorry. Is basically, if Luka does this, he's now in a conversation with Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Magic Johnson. That's the list. That's the list of guys that have led teams to do this. I just want that.
I will say, though?
I just want that to be out in the atmosphere.
I will say, though, aside from LeBron's 3-1 comeback with the Cavs, those are all-time great players, but those were also all-time great teams, too.
It's fair. It's a completely fair point.
And as much as I love them, the Dallas Mavericks aren't an all-time great team.
The argument would be neither are the Celtics, probably, but stats tell you that they kind of are. So that's why I like it's 2 points that kind of refute each other. It's kind of annoying. I'm using it just for the sake of, I know how it's going to sound, but I've told you this many times when we've done pods together. I like to protect NBA history, and like you just kind of have to throw some logic into that. Like you threw the team example, which I was hoping you didn't do, because that does kind of refute all of that. But it's okay, because technically, if he still does it, we have to kind of think of their team as really good.
Team, yeah.
It kind of does. So it's like, all right, all these points talk in a circle, which is really fun. The last Boston team to go into the finals as a favorite was the 1986 team, arguably the best one ever. So again, I'm just giving you things these things. I'm not arguing for the Celtics here, because that's just not what I'm doing, and you're not really arguing for the Mavs, as people might not believe that, but that's what's happening. That's all that. I didn't mean for this to be perfectly 30 minutes, but tee it up. Who wins the finals and how many games, and maybe like 3 minutes on why.
I gotta go with the Mavs in 7. I'd be doing the Mavericks family a disservice if I didn't pick them. As much as I want to
believe it, though. Like, you truly believe that it can happen, and this is how.
I do, and as crazy as it sounds, I think it kind of plays into their favor that they don't have home court advantage.
It doesn't matter
I
anymore. Yeah. I mean,
They
home
want
court's
a game
irrelevant.
7, especially for that guy, number 77. He wants a game 7 on the road. He lives for that stuff. So I just think I think it is going to be a tight knit series. And like I said earlier, we didn't really mention him that much on here, but Jason Kidd deserves all the credit in the world for the way he's been able to just change his game plan throughout the course of these playoffs, depending on the matchup. So again, when you have a coach who's willing to make the adjustments and a guy in number 77 who knows how to read every single defense you throw at him, I mean, he just really exposed the number one defense in the NBA and made them look so fraudulent. It was really crazy what he did to them, especially in the closeout game. And that's what I'm saying. He probably threw game 4 on purpose just to go into Minnesota and rip their hearts out, honestly. But I trust Luka. I trust what Jason Kidd's doing, and I just don't trust Joe Mazzulla and these Celtics, man. I know we just sat here for 30 minutes reading all these stats about how they're an all-time great team. The eye test to me just doesn't say that. So I'm gonna ride with my guy. I'm going with the Mavs in 7.
So I am going to talk out everything that I've dealt with internally for the last 5 days. And when I land on the conclusion, you're probably not going to be surprised.
I'm thankful that I'm like a partial Mavericks fan, because if I had no like ties in the series, I really don't know who I would have picked.
That's my
It probably would have been Boston, but I really don't know.
So here's a couple things that I'm just going to put out there. Think of this as basketball prediction therapy. So I went on a radio show last Friday on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, and I said, I have 5 days to change this. I had an idea we were doing this spot. I think we hadn't scheduled it yet, but I kind of had a feeling I had time to think about it. I had time to absorb it. I had time to hear what you had to say, and now this is it. This is going up on the internet tomorrow. I said Celtics in 6 or 7. Let's just say 6 for the sake of, like, at the time, 5 days apart. I hadn't watched a lot of film yet to, like, really see what I thought about some things. And so, in a roundabout way, everything about the Celtics that I think is an advantage for them every other series or in years past, because this is the first year of this iteration of this team, like, truly, where they've kind of taken it to another level with Derek White, taken it to another level with Drew Holiday. As much as I would love to see that, I think it'd be incredible for Drew Holiday to win a title in 2 places like that. I really do. I think that would cement him in some places. That would be really cool. Everything that they can do defensively isn't going to help them in this series. It's not. I know they have the depth. I know they have the guys to throw at them, because that's the thing they do have. They have 4 rotational wings that they can throw at Luka and Kyrie. My issue is I don't think that's enough of them. So this is where NBA history, this is probably the few times in the 3.5, almost 4 years I've done this podcast, where I'm going to go against NBA history, and I'm going to tell you that if it's Game 7, I'm having like war flashbacks of the Celtics going to isolation ball. It's in TD Garden. Fans are going to get nervous. The best player is going to be on the other side, who's an absolute NBA top 75 player, stone cold killer, who's going to put his foot on their neck, and he's going to win the series, and I'm not going to sit at home with my mouth on the floor. I think the Mavs win in 7.
I might cry right now.
It's nuts.
The
fact that that's where I ended up is stupid.
You to pick the Mavs at all.
It's stupid. It's stupid that this is even like. I left out things that obviously like would play in both favors for the sake of time, for the sake of trouble of talking it out, because we really already did that.
I'm really tearing up, bro. I prayed for this.
I
prayed for this.
Like, I didn't even mention Joe Mazzulla, but you did earlier, right? So it's an incredible point. I didn't mention the fact that, like, the Celtics, albeit have been really healthy, but they're one, like, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps, that's kind of an obvious. Al Horford, they're one guy getting hurt away from this series getting really uncomfortable really, really fast, like Game 2, Game 3, and Mavs are up 2-1 and nobody's surprised, but it's because somebody got hurt. If these teams are too fully healthy, like, I don't see a world where if these two teams are fully healthy and the Mavs, like, steal one in Boston, basically, I don't see a world where this doesn't go 7 if both teams are healthy. And then by that point, the argument is, well, you have everything I laid out about the final 5 minutes. Like, I hope that happens so that we can sit here, like, because it's going to. It happened already this series, this playoffs with Luka. You're going to get to a scenario where he's the best player on the other end of the floor, You're the team, you're the fans, you're the other people on the other side rooting against him, right? I'm thinking about that Thunder series specifically where even if he doesn't have an incredible, because the Thunder held him to some of his lowest counting stats in his career. It's crazy to think that, right? The Lou Dort effect there. But you're going to sit there and you're going to legitimately be in a fearful state. It's over. It's done. It doesn't matter where the game's played. The game can be played on Mars. It doesn't care. So, yeah, I don't know. I've done like call that basketball talk therapy, but like it just is what it is, and nobody's surprised by it probably. But I don't know.
It's insane how good this guy is at basketball, man. It's making a historian like you go against NBA history.
Like, everything tells me it's stupid what I just said for the last 5 minutes. That's what's crazy. Like, that's what doesn't, like, it hasn't set in yet where I'm like, if they win game one, like, I'm not going to feel bad about anything because that's all the momentum they would need to put Boston against the wall. But hopefully the championship DNA, because that's one thing I didn't mention today, as we'll get wrapped up here in a second, is Boston does have guys that have been there, right? As much as we discredit it, that series where, like Kyrie's really the only guy to have played in championship settings for the Mavs where it really matters. For Boston, it's Tatum and Brown have played in 7 of the last 9 Eastern Conference Finals. They played in the finals 2 years ago. They know how that feels. They know the late start times. They know how tight those games feel, et cetera. Right? They've been through it now. They really have that advantage on their back. You have Drew Holiday. You have Al Horford, who's been around a long time. You have guys where you're like, they know what it takes to get it done. And yet I still think Joe Mazzulla, even though he had that same experience, I don't know against Jason Kidd, even though I don't think either of those guys are like exceptional head coaches by any stretch of the imagination. I think they're both good. There's just too much against them where the best player has to matter. It does.
That's what it is. It's as simple as that.
Really quick. Let's do like 3 minutes because it's not official yet. JJ Redick, as of right now, I'm going to sit this one out because I don't have an opinion, to be honest with you. But what do you think about the fact that JJ Redick is technically more than likely to wake up tomorrow morning or the next day and he's the Lakers coach? Is there anything that you've been sitting on about this? Maybe you've done it on a pod and I didn't hear it, like anything like that.
Let's break down what you just said. A podcaster, a guy who does what you and I do, who
he also played 14 years in the league and never missed the playoffs, and we didn't. Let me just be real for a second.
I'm gonna get to that. But currently does what you and I do. And what does he say on the podcast? He coaches what, his 9-year-old son, 10-year-old son? A guy who coaches 9-year-olds is about to jump up to the NBA and coach the best player to ever touch a basketball. That just in and of itself is a crazy thing to think about. And yes, of course, JJ Redick has played 14 years in the NBA. He's battle tested. He's been to a finals. Like the guy knows the NBA. And, you know, we have the luxury of listening to his thoughts on basketball and how he sees the game. Like, the guy understands the game. There's no question about that. And, you know, I know a lot of people are questioning, you know, how could a guy who's never coached at this level, how can he get the respect like from the team and stuff like that? If you have the stamp of approval from LeBron James, everyone else will fall in line. To me, it's that simple. If LeBron respects the guy, everyone else will fall in line. So, I don't think there's going to be any problems like that where like there's a power imbalance and they don't respect him or anything like that. I think he's going to be very well respected. I really don't have any opinions because I've never seen what he could do as a coach at any level. So it's probably the most interesting thing in basketball outside of this NBA Finals series right now. I mean, what is JJ Redick's game plans going to be? What's a JJ Redick led offense going to look like? What's a JJ Redick defensive scheme going to look like? It's very interesting for sure.
Yeah, less an opinion, more of an observation. But there's this, we've seen it 100 times where the coach gets done with the coaching world and they have this open chair of broadcasting for them, right? Like even in football, Brady did it, but it took him a few years, whatever, right? Mark Jackson, right? That's kind of what, even though that Mark Jackson situation on NBA, ESPN, I know they kind of broke up for other contractual reasons and layoffs and such, but the further Mark Jackson got away from being an active head coach, the less information and good premise he was giving us on broadcasts, right? We hear these broadcasts. I know how much you watch it. You get what I'm trying to say. right? Like Doc Rivers, right? He was incredible on those broadcasts, the 20 to 30 he's done, right?
Yeah.
And then he took the Bucks head coach job halfway through the year, right? And we knew how in touch he was with the league because he had just left it. I say all that because JJ he's been retired, like 2-3 years now. So like he's just starting to get away from it where he's given me such valuable information on these broadcasts, whether he's limited or not, that I think that's going to help him. Like I said, less of an observation, more of an opinion, or yeah, you get my point. Less of an opinion, more of an observation. But the further these guys get away from the league, the more they become this typical head coach, which is why I think Steve Nash failed a little bit. Jason Kidd figured it out, right? Chauncey Billups figured it out so far. Sam Cassell, I'm just giving you guys just examples of like, God, it doesn't, if you're a player, the last couple of years, 10 to 15 years have told us that you're more than likely not going to be a great coach early on, right? Again, Chauncey Billups as an example. I just laid out kind of both sides of it. All that to say, regardless of the LeBron James stamp of approval, we know he's intelligent, and we know that I think that 3 years removed in respect level of never missing the playoffs, being a winning player, pedigree at Duke. Like there's a lot of things that are in his play, in his kind of idea where, as stupid as this sounds, he's old enough now where there might be a young guy that they're drafting that watched him at Duke. So we're kind of bridging this gap where I think I really don't, if they are successful, there's a lot more that has to be in play. Like if he took over a team and in 2 to 3 years they were in the playoffs, obviously a lot of scenarios have to go certain ways that to make that happen, not just the head coach. It's not like college where the guy can come in and rebuild a program. But if he's successful, I'm not surprised. Whether it's the Lakers or whether it's in the next, whether he's like, if he's I'm trying to think of a player that was real. I mean, if he's Jason, actually, let's be real for a second. If he's Jason Kidd, Luka or not, I don't think anyone's surprised. I don't.
Not at all.
So I ended up finding a way to make an opinion out of that. It's insane. All right, 40 minutes. That's a perfect number. I appreciate your time because I asked for 30. Plug away, ball game. Obviously, we got Trivia Showdown. We'll work that out. We'll work the details out. Should be soon here. As soon as the finals is over, those are going to be lined up. I'm excited to have you back for that. But for y'all stuff, let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, on all socials, ballgamepod _ or ballgame podcast. I forget which is which. If you just look up ballgame, will probably come up. Put the POD and it'll be there. But we have a lot of stuff coming. Obviously, the NBA finals are up, but we have a whole game plan for fantasy football stuff that we're gonna start dropping over the summer. So we have a lot of stuff coming. So if you guys like fantasy football, make sure you guys tune into the Ballgame podcast. And Trevor, thank you for having me on, man.
Thanks for being here as always. I'm excited I know you can talk basketball. I know you watch it, but you might have seen Trivia Showdown in the past. I think you've liked and commented on some of the shows, which we appreciate. It's not easy. I make that clear. There's 3 rules: is have fun, learn something, and it's going to be really difficult. So I'm excited for Trivia Showdown to be there. We'll keep the guest on lock for now until we get that narrowed down, but we're pretty sure we know who it is. He'll be a first-timer here, but we're super excited to have him. So thanks again, as always, my friend.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you.